Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Friday, February 7th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 486 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me, and we've got a couple different topics to discuss today. Some news on Davante Adams, latest reporting what Ian Rappaport is hearing. He has yet to talk to the New York Jets about his future, so we will break that down. What is the future of Davante Adams? We'll also break down the new running backs coach has been named today as the New York Jets will hire Nic McKissic-Luke to be their new running backs coach, the 11th member of Aaron Glenn's coaching staff. So we will get to that as well a little later on here on a Friday edition of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, thank you to those of you listening on all the different audio podcast platforms as well. Appreciate your support so much. Means a lot. And another episode here today. As always, before we begin, we got to tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. Let's take a look at some Super Bowl 59 prop bets for this weekend, just 2 days away from the big game. If you want to get in on any of the betting action this weekend for the Super Bowl, click my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. If you're looking for tickets for the best in entertainment or sports, SeatGeek has it. And if it's your first time using SeatGeek, use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase and get yourself out to some awesome events. Also, our friends over at Huga House, if you want any of their brand new arrival hats or sweatshirts, use promo code BUBS for 15% off any purchase. And when you use that code on your first purchase, you'll get 30% off your second purchase. So definitely check that out and get yourself some Huga House swag. All of those links can be found in the description of the video on both YouTube and all podcast platforms. So here we go, episode 486. Thank you so much for those of you tuning in today, Friday edition of the podcast. We've got some Davante Adams stuff to discuss here. I want to play a clip from Ian Rappaport the other day, yesterday on NFL Network, live at Radio Row in New Orleans, discussing some Jets notes. Also talked a little about Rodgers, but we've talked a little bit recently here about Rodgers, obviously down in Phoenix right now golfing, said some things about how he's talked to the Jets. We'll figure things out when we figure them out. That was the Rodgers quote that we discussed yesterday. I want to get into some stuff here about Davante Adams. Here was Ian Rappaport on Davante Adams, his future with the Jets, and the fact that both sides have not talked to each other since Muji and Glenn were hired.
Yes, Rhett, the Jets acquired Davante Adams for a third-round pick. The thought was that it would be a spark for the team in 2024, Ian. But in 2025, they were going to have to figure out what to do with that big salary number, $36 million in cash, $38 million in cap. They're going to have to massage both here as they go forward here. What is the latest with Davante Adams and the Jets?
Well, they're either going to have to massage the cap number, automatically convert it, which they are allowed to do in the contract if they want to keep him, or not. And it's the not that's the most interesting. My understanding is the Jets have not been in contact with Davante Adams since the new general manager, Darren Mujian, since the new head coach, Aaron Glenn, came on and took over. But, we spent a lot of time talking about the decision about whether or not they're bringing back Aaron Rodgers. The Davante Adams decision is fascinating, too. They are not going to carry $36 million cap number for a 30-something receiver. Now, if Davante Adams was eventually released, my guess right now is that he would want to be somewhere on the West Coast, want to go where he was, obviously wanted to go to the Raiders for a time, was there for a time, liked it on the West Coast. Wouldn't be surprised if he ended up there, but clearly that decision is something the Jets will have to make in the coming weeks and months. Meanwhile, we also got a little bit of...
So there's Ian Rappaport with some really interesting nuggets there on some of the cap numbers, his future, and all that stuff. Now, the biggest thing, of course, as I mentioned here before I played that clip, was this quote right here from Ian Rappaport. My understanding is the Jets have not been in contact with Davante Adams since the new general manager, Darren Mujian, and since the new head coach, Aaron Glenn, came in and took over. That was, of course, yesterday. I don't think this comes by much of a surprise that they haven't been in contact. Look, the biggest thing for the New York Jets right now that they need to figure out, not only is it the front office overhaul that they are going through right now, but it's also the coaching staff that they continue to fill out. Like I said, hiring a running backs coach earlier today, which we'll get to here in the second half of this show. But it's going to come down to the Aaron Rodgers decision. Once the Aaron Rodgers decision happened, which we've known for a while now, once this happens, that's where you're going to get that trickle-down effect, and you're going to really start to figure everything else out. You're going to figure out, I think, the future of Davante Adams. Then you can start to get into the Garrett Wilson situation, ideally trying to extend him long-term. You'll then have free agency, all these different things, the draft, all these different things that'll then have to take place, potentially retaining players of your own. So a lot still needs to happen, but it all starts with the Rodgers decision. And I think it's pretty clear that if Aaron Rodgers is back, Davante Adams is back. If Aaron Rodgers is not back, Davante Adams is not back. I also think it's clear that if Aaron Rodgers is back, which we've talked about this a lot, he's going to need to restructure his contract because that 2026 dead cap is hideous. It's horrendous. Not what you want, right? It's ugly, I think, is the best way to put it. So we've known that. Same thing with Davante Adams. You mentioned the $36 million. You're going to need to adjust that contract if he wants to be here for 2025. And I think that's pretty clear. I don't think there's any surprise to this. I don't think it should be shocking that the two sides haven't talked because to me, Davante Adams' future hinges on Aaron Rodgers, and we haven't gotten an announcement yet. We haven't gotten anything official yet on Aaron Rodgers' future, whether that's with the Jets, whether that's with another team, whether that's retiring. Whatever that is, we haven't got that answer yet. Once we do, I think you'll get a better understanding of the whole Davante Adams situation. And I've mentioned this a lot. I would take Davante Adams back. I was in the boat all year long last year, more towards when things got ugly, that I wanted to really blow it up and really tear it down and get rid of Rodgers and all this stuff. But with a rookie head coach, with a rookie GM, I've started to warm more up a little bit to the fact that I would be more open now than I was about a month ago to Aaron Rodgers returning, and that also goes for Davante Adams, but it's, of course, got to be under certain circumstances, right? They both got to take pay cuts, and you also look at this offense, it's got to be different than it was a year ago, and I think Davante Adams, you throw his name into it as well, he's got to be willing to play in this new scheme, to play to play under Tanner Engstrand as the new offensive coordinator, to be willing to adjust. Same thing with Rodgers here in 2025. It's not going to be your 2024 Aaron Rodgers to Davante Adams, let me try and get my 500th touchdown show. It's got to be spreading the ball out more. It's got to be running the ball a lot more. It's got to be no longer of trying to just force feed Davante Adams. That can't be the case. So there does need to be adjustments from those two guys as well. Now, you look at Davante Adams' 2024 season, even at the age of 31, he turned 32 in December, so his 31-32 season, he had another 1,000-yard season. He ranked 18th in receptions, ranked 18th in yards, and 13th, tied for 13th in touchdowns. So he still remains a top 10 receiver, and I still like the potential of a Davante Adams and a Garrett Wilson 1-2 punch, especially because of the fact that if you take away Davante Adams from this wide receiver room right now, who is left Allen Lazard's going to be gone, rightfully so. Then you take Davante Adams out, so it's Garrett Wilson and nobody. Really, it's Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley, Irv Charles. What are we doing outside of that? There's nothing there. Xavier Gipson, no way. There's nothing. It's Garrett Wilson and nobody. So at least if you can bridge the gap for another year and have some more help next to Garrett Wilson, Davante Adams provides that for another season. And then potentially you draft somebody this year and develop them. Maybe you go with a Tet McMillan in round 1 and you bring him in, and he doesn't have to be relied on right away year 1 to be the next guy next to Garrett. He can kind of have a year to learn under Garrett, learn under Davante, and in 2026, kind of that be your new 1-2 punch, Garrett and McMillan, something like that. We'll see how that all plays out, but I would totally be open to Davante Adams coming back, but it's got to be under certain circumstances. It's got to be under the fact that this team needs to run the ball more. They're going to need to run a lot more pre-stat motion. There's going to need to be a lot more spreading the ball around, getting the tight ends involved, getting the ball more to Garrett Wilson. And I know you're going to think, Garrett Wilson, he had all these targets last year, and I get all that. Garrett Wilson last season, when you look at the targets, was right up there near the top of the league. He had 101 receptions. I get all that. But there's got to be context to those numbers too. And the context is the minute Davante Adams was brought in, Garrett Wilson's target numbers significantly decreased. From when Davante Adams was from pre-Davante Adams to post-Davante Adams, his targets were not the same. Especially when you really break it down as to when in the games he was getting targeted and all that stuff. It was the Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams show. That can't be the case in 2025. And it won't be because Tanner Engstrand, that's just not the way they run their offense. You're going to get the tight ends hopefully a lot more involved. You're going to run the ball a lot more. For Rodgers' sake, right, there's going to be a lot more under center. There's going to be a lot more play action. Do both of those guys want to be a part of it? That's unknown. I would welcome both back. I'd be happy if both were back because I want this team to try and compete and win games next year. I don't want them to just fall on their, just fall backwards and win 4 games and tank. I think this team's got talent. I think it would be a positive for Aaron Glenn to start his tenure off on a high note as opposed to going into year 2 with a ton of pressure on him to have success right away with a rookie quarterback. Right? You can't go, I don't want a case to be where they win 4 games next year and then you're going to 2026. And if Glenn wins 5 games, then what? We're in the same cycle 2 years later. I think your best chance to win is if you try and bring back both these guys in Davante and Rodgers. So we'll see what happens. But I don't take a ton of stock in them not talking. I think it's going to be whatever Rodgers does, Davante does. And Rappaport also mentioned in that report that if Rodgers doesn't come back, Davante would be open to going back to the West Coast, which is where he tried to go in Vegas, teaming up with his college teammate Derek Carr. I think you look at Davante post-Jets, would probably like to go to a place where he can compete for a Super Bowl, right? Hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. He's in his 30s now, getting to the tail end of his prime, tail end of his career. Go to a place where he could still play a pretty large role. I don't think he'll be a number 1 on a Super Bowl team, but be a number 2 option on a Super Bowl contender and try and win. And who would that be? We'll see. That's unknown. But first, you got to see what happens with Rodgers and the Jets. And then I think you get your Davante Adams answer. But there's a lot that goes into it. He needs to take a pay cut. He needs to restructure. You need to adjust the contract. Rodgers as well. And offensively, it's going to look a lot different, and it needs to look a lot different. And both guys need to realize that going into 2025. And we'll see if that's the case. By the way, just one couple more numbers here before we get into our next subject. 11 games last year with the Jets, 114 targets, 61 receptions, 854 yards, 12.7 yards per reception, 7 touchdowns. Look, Davante Adams is still a very good receiver, even in a supposed down year for him, which included a trade middle of the year from Vegas to the Jets where there was still no winning, right? He thought he was getting, kind of learned that grass isn't always greener on the other side. He still put up 1,000 yards. For the fifth consecutive season, rather. And 6 out of the last 7 at age 32. All right, so let's move on here to our next topic, and that is the New York Jets hiring running backs coach, the 11th coach now to Aaron Glenn's coaching staff, 6 on offense, 4 on defense, and of course, Chris Banjo, the special teams coordinator. But the New York Jets have hired Nic McKissic-Luke to be their new running backs coach here for 2025 and beyond with Aaron Glenn. So another name added to the list. Heavy college background here for Nic McKissic-Luke. Many consider a rising star, kind of a guy that deserves an NFL opportunity, and it's kind of been knocking at the door. When you look at some of his career, just where he's been college-wise, he's been the running backs coach with Minnesota since 2023, so over the last 2 seasons. He also spent time with Northern Illinois previously as the running backs coach. In 2021 there, Northern Illinois had in 2021, they had the 4th ranked rushing offense in the country in college football. So has had some success at multiple stops, has been around college football now for a little bit. Again, considered a guy that's been rising up the ranks, that deserves an NFL opportunity, and he gets that. And he's actually one of a few Minnesota coaches that have been taken off the staff to come to the NFL. So he joins that group here to join the Jets. Look, I'm not going to sit here and this is a massive, massive move. It's a positional coach. It's another name added to the coaching staff. I've said this a lot. I would still like to see another veteran name added to this staff. They added Scott Turner. I like that move a lot as the pass game coordinator. I would still like to see a Todd Haley, an Anthony Lynn, somebody like that to come in here as an advisor and oversee things. I really like the Rick Spielman move in the front office. I really like Steve Wilks. I also really like Eric Washington, 2 defensive guys, Wilks the DC, Washington the defensive lines coach, 2 guys with a wealth of experience. Let's get that on the offensive side of the football. Still waiting for that. But again, I think he's going to play a big role because this is a team and this is a offense that's going to rely a lot more, hopefully, on the run game next year. And the run game next year needs to be better. And he's going to play a piece in that, right? Breece Hall needs to have 20 carries in multiple games next season. He did not have 20 carries in a game this year. And it's going to be an offense that's going to run the ball a lot more. You look at what Detroit was able to do under Ben Johnson, Tanner Engstrand coming from that Detroit offense, that's what you're going to see a lot more of. And you've got 2 really good running backs. You've got a really promising 1-2 punch, right? Breece Hall, I think, can we finally use him properly this year? I mean, through the first 3 years of his career, I still feel like they haven't properly used him, especially the last 2 years where he's been healthy, right? Year 1 torn the ACL, season ended early, but especially the last 2 seasons where you had the offensive coordinator openly come out in 2023, halfway through the year, that he didn't know he was much of a threat in the passing game. Let's use these guys properly. He's also got an opportunity here to work with Braylon Allen, who I thought showed some positives last year, is I think a nice number 2 alongside Breece. I also think they need to use Braylon Allen better than they used him last year. I think 3rd and short, 4th and short, those situations, Braylon Allen's got to be that guy. Big, strong, downhill back to pick up the short yards. Breece is your do-it-all guy, and Isaiah Davis is a nice depth piece, and even a special teams guy as well. So, new running backs coach, 11th coach added to the coaching staff. Again, 6 offensively so far, 4 defensively, and then your special teams coordinator in Chris Banjo. So the Jets continue to fill out their front office, or I should say overhaul their front office, continue to fill out their coaching staff as we hit already a week into February. The offseason's going by pretty quickly so far. We're already a month in, and Jets are making a lot of ground from a coaching and front office perspective. The next biggest domino that needs to fall is Aaron Rodgers. Because I'll tell you what, I think we're all getting tired of breaking down all the possibilities. Oh, what if this happens, Davante, this, that. I want a decision soon here. I want to know the future. and figure out where this team's headed with the quarterback position, whether that's with Rodgers or not Rodgers. And hopefully that's happened soon. And I think it will. I think once the Super Bowl ends next week after that, I think within the next 2 weeks or so, you're going to start to get answers because free agency right there in March, next month, things really start to pick up. So we'll have a lot more content coming your way. Stay tuned. If I don't talk to you by the Super Bowl, enjoy the big game on Sunday. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Who do you got taking home the Lombardi here in Super Bowl 59? The Chiefs three-peat, or do the Eagles get their revenge? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Also, let me know what you think on Davante Adams' future with the Jets. Do you want him back? Do you think he's coming back? What are your thoughts? And also your thoughts on the latest Jets coaching staff hire. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.